Hello everybody and welcome to the latest edition of the Rewatch Project with Hannah and Mike. I am Mike and with me as always is Hannah. How are you this evening, Hannah?
I'm ready to do things that don't involve putting kids to bed.
Okay, well maybe they will get up again and that will be scuppered, we will see. I'm sure that through the magic of editing and a rigorous post-production process that will all go unnoticed. But yes, we are back into talking about Babylon 5. We are on the 11th episode of season 1. Tell us about the episode we're going to be watching tonight, Hannah.
Okay, tonight we are watching Survivors. Synopsis says Garibaldi is blamed for an accident aboard B5 leading to his return to the bottle.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Not the alcohol bottle.
The proverbial wagon.
Gosh,
or he's fallen off it.
Okay.
It's directed by Jim Johnston and written by Marc Scott Zicree.
All right, so a non-JMS episode. So I think the run of standalones continues. So we should be in for hopefully an entertaining 42 or 43 minutes of television. Just a couple of quick bits of housekeeping before we get onto that. Have we got any feedback, by the way?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, before we also get onto that, I will remind you how you can send us said feedback. First and foremost, you can email us at rewatchprojectpodcast@gmail.com, or probably more easily, particularly if you consume the podcast through YouTube, just leave comments right here on the channel and we'll read those out if it feels like they are appropriate to do so. Also, check out the other content on this channel, the other assorted film, television, music, and general pop culture goodness that cohabits here. And also do check out our friend shows, including Chinstroker versus Punter, The Good, the Bad, and the Odd, Talk Without Rhythm podcast, Film Bastards, and Entertainment Landfill. We very much appreciate likes and subscribes as well on the channel. Subscriptions make a really big difference. It raises the profile of the channel, means more people find us more easily and engage in the conversation, which is the primary motivator for doing these with a greater level of regularity. And last but not least, we very much appreciate donations via PayPal, if and only if you can afford to do so without causing yourself any financial hardship, because we do not want that. So feedback, Hannah, go for it.
Okay. So we have our regular feedbacker, Mike's Musings, on our last episode, Believers. This episode still triggers intense arguments in the B5 community. Most of them tend to overlook the desires of the child.
Yeah.
And that's very true. The child's sort of irrelevant to the process, isn't it?
It's funny as well, like a lot of 90s sci-fi shows have one episode where there is a moral conundrum that divides the fandom. One of the great examples of that comes up again and again and again is an episode of Star Trek Voyager called Tuvix, where the character of Tuvok and Neelix get merged, and it creates this new person, Tuvix. And they have to decide whether to let them continue as this new life form who has their own sentience, or return them to how they were, essentially killing this person.
Yeah.
So it gets into this moral debate, and it's a running joke in Star Trek fandom that if you want to start a fight at a Star Trek convention, it's like bringing up politics at the Christmas dinner table. It's one of those, nobody's going to mention Tuvix, and I think that this episode of Babylon 5 is the equivalent of that.
It's like the COVID vaccine.
It is, yeah. It's like, let's
all discuss that.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Okay. He goes on to say, Ivanova broke the rules and saved the child and family. Franklin broke the rules, but it didn't end as well. JMS was upfront with cute kids will not survive, unlike Star Trek.
Yeah, there's a few things in season 1 that feel kind of mission statement-y, where it kind of plays in the Star Trek sandpit, but maybe has an outcome that you might not get in Star Trek. Although it's got to be said, in some 90s Star Trek, it doesn't always go a hero's way.
No, absolutely. But I think he makes a good point. And Babylon 5 kind of sets their ethos out that it's a level playing field.
Yeah, kids are usually safe in these things, aren't
they? Whoever needs to die for the best story is going to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you as always.
We appreciate the consistency and the quality of your feedback.
Yes, we do. I also have a new feedbacker, Susie QN9E.
Okay.
Hi, Hannah and Mike. My first time watching this channel, and you are both so funny and sweet. And great teachers for someone like me who has not watched any of these shows.
Oh, cool.
Very exciting. Hannah, you are lovely. Thanks.
Cheers.
Oh, and your sweetheart husband is the greatest Elvis reactor. Oh. I look forward.
I'm not the greatest Elvis impersonator, though.
Definitely not. I look forward to watching more of your reactions. Thank you for explaining the different situations, especially for someone like me who is unfamiliar with the shows. Thank you.
No, well,
that's
wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank
Great.
you so much for the feedback.
Yeah.
And welcome to Babylon 5.
Yes, it's good having that cross-pollination
Absolutely.
between the content. And thank you for your kind words and your patronage, Susie.
Yes, absolutely. Another new feedbacker, Anne-Marie Rings 6606. You guys are adorable. Oh, we're adorbs.
Are we?
I've recently started Babylon 5, and I must say I thought it was slow going to start. I'm up to season 3 now, and what surprised me most was how prejudicial I was when I was deciding who the good guy was in the case of Jakar and Malari.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing with this show. Is one of the great themes is people can change.
And don't judge book by its cover.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing, one of the things I like about Babylon 5 is it doesn't tell you that. It shows you that.
Yeah.
And
if you give yourself over to the story, it gets presented to you and unfolds at the pace that you need it to unfold at.
Enjoy the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you're enjoying it, and we will continue to be adorable.
I see where you went wrong there. You were amalgamating.
I was amalgamating. I don't get called adorable, and it's sent me all aflutter.
It has, hasn't it? You've got got a pinkish hue all of a sudden. But yes, very much appreciated to all of our feedbackers. Please continue to do so either via email, rewatchprojectpodcast@gmail.com, or leaving comments here. So is that it for this week?
Yes, it is.
All right, so we're going to hit pause. We are going to watch the 11th episode of Season 1 of Babylon 5, and then we're going to come back and do a non-spoiler review. And if we are sufficiently moved to get into any spoiler discussion, we will do that at the very end. But I believe because this is a standalone episode, we may not do that. But we'll be very clear about it if we do. So, yeah, we're going to watch some B5 and be back very soon.
Bye.
And we're back. So we've just finished watching Survivors, the 11th episode of Season 1 of Babylon 5. Hannah, initial thoughts on this episode?
I keep thinking, I'm a survivor. I'm not gonna
Well, the last episode was Believers. So it was kind of like...
yeah.
What catchy pop song is the next one? Episode 12 of Babylon 5, Material Girl, is going to be next. The season finale, Vogue. But yes, thoughts beyond the name of the episode.
Me now. That'd be good. I thought it was good. It was a good standalone. One of my favourite bits was the conversation between Garibaldi and Malari. He's just, I mean, Londo is, well, you know, he's my favourite character.
Yeah.
And just every time he's on screen, I love it.
Yeah.
The sadness that runs through everything in him, even in moments of brevity with him, is kind of, he's so nuanced as a character. It's really interesting.
The thing with Londo at this point in the show is this feeling that everything is in the rearview mirror. That it's all about again, and it's never about new.
No, yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. I thought it gave more depth to Garibaldi.
Yeah.
And you know, it's something to remember is we are only 11 episodes in. And I know last episode I said we're only 10 episodes in. It's still very early on in the process.
And when you're rewatching a show, you kind of have to remind yourself of that a little bit, because we're bringing all of the accumulative knowledge of the universe and the characters as well. So you have to kind of take yourself back to that first viewing.
Yeah, and I mean, each season is over 20 episodes a season, so there's a lot more story to come before things move on a great deal.
And the thing is, there was I think people are coming back round on this, but there was a time when people used to see that as a negative. Like when you saw the rise of prestige television, it was this
like 8 episodes.
Yeah, it was like, oh, it's great. There's only 8 episodes, so there's no filler. And I get that, but I think that one of the things that got lost is what I've referred to a lot as the hangout factor. Just the fact that you get to spend time with these characters, and when you get a show that's like 22, 24, 26 episodes, and you figure they're weekly, it's half the year. Half the year, every year, these characters are in your life, as opposed to 8 weeks a year, every 2 years.
I think also with the type of show that this is, if it was to be any less than 20 plus episodes, you wouldn't get enough nuance to each character, because there is such a big story being told. Once you get to the end of the 5th season and reflect back, there is a lot still to come.
Well, if this show was made now, there'd be less characters. Because one of the reasons they have so many characters, particularly once you start getting down to the level of characters like Lanier and Via, is they're there because if you're making 24 of these a year, you have to have a lot of characters just to give actors a break.
Yeah.
And to be able to tell those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you find it?
Yeah, I enjoyed this. It's funny because I think in some ways this is a classic season 1 Babylon 5 standalone episode in the way that what it does is I think its enjoyment comes from 2 things. I think its enjoyment comes from the fact that in many ways there's a surprising amount, with hindsight, of stealth world building in this episode. So there's that. And the other enjoyment is the nostalgia for this type of storytelling.
Yeah.
That kind of disappears from Babylon 5 certainly by the time you get past the midway point of season 2. I don't think there are any standalones after that point. And there's very few even in season 2. And
I think Fringe is very like that as well. Like
a lot of shows are.
Yeah, just that sort of world building and character establishing period, really lends itself to one-off things.
There's a practical reason for it as well, because one of the reasons why back then the TV stations liked standalones was it meant new audience members could come into the show, even if they hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
But I think what happens with a lot of shows is they get to a point where I think that they accept that they're not going to find any new viewers. That the show's audience is what it is. And if that's enough to keep the show going, great. If it's not, then the show gets cancelled. But if it is enough to keep the show going, then I think often they take the sort of training wheels off and are like, hey, just go for it. So, but I think that this type of storytelling that you got in the 1990s when you had these standalone episodes of shows that ran for many, many episodes a season, what often people refer to as procedural. Like a procedural is something like Columbo or the Rockford Files or, Magnum PI or CSI, where, you get a very distinct storyline every week. And it's interesting because we are starting to see a resurgence of that with shows like Poker Face, that really are now getting lauded for their originality because they do standalones, which seems crazy. That was seen as a thing we were trying to escape.
Yeah,
but like anything, it's about balance.
It is. Yeah, I mean, there's a time and a place for prestige, short, information heavy shows, and there's also a place for long procedurals.
I mean, inevitably what happens is eventually, whatever the prevailing format is, a sort of fatigue or a malaise sets in over time. You know, after a while, people got tired of the structure, and a big part of it as well was around advertising as well, because when you think about network TV shows, they had to be structured around the ad breaks. You know, you knew you had to have 3 or 4 ad breaks, so you had to have a rise in action and then a kind of like a mini kind of story climax before the break.
You can totally see where the end parts
are.
Yeah,
it's and what that ultimately results in is formula.
Yeah.
Because you have to be like, well, we need a rise in action here, we need a denouement here, we need, you know, all of these kind of things. So I think that one of the things that I enjoy, I mean, the negatives of episodes like this is that they're relatively insubstantial, and that these sort of episodes often hang on the guest stars. And the guest stars in this one are fine. The actress who plays Garrett, she's fine. She's a 1990s TV actress who's coming in and doing her thing.
I've not seen her in anything.
Doing a little bit of sci-fi acting. I think often what you would see, really up until I think The X-Files, where science fiction was actually started to be taken seriously by the mainstream and was seen as being... Because The X-Files was actually perceived as a drama, in the same way that shows like ER, or its porn version, UR, and you know, St. Elsewhere and Hill Street Blues and those sort of shows, which were the sort of the prestige TV of their day. Whereas science fiction and genre was always seen almost like cartoons. It was seen as for children, even though, you know, not that many children watch Star Trek. It would just bore them. And so what you would get often is actors would come in and be like, oh, okay, so we've got spacesuits on. So they do this weird kind of broad acting that they wouldn't have done if they'd been on St. Elsewhere, or Cagney and Lacey or something, you know. And there's a little bit of that in this. There's a little bit of broad kind of like, oh, I'll dumb it down a bit kind of, which you often get in standalones on 90s TV shows.
And I think people who see it that way really miss the fact that sci-fi has this amazing ability to be so comforting and reassuring.
And aspirational.
Yeah, and aspirational in times of crisis. Like, I think that's why I always, if I'm particularly anxious or something big's happening that I can't control in reality, then I always look to sci-fi.
Because even if it's dealing with difficult stuff, there's that detachment from reality.
And there's a solution to it.
Yeah.
In sci-fi. There's always some... I think that's, like, on a very different tip, but I think that's why Parks and Rec was as popular as it was in some ways, because it didn't matter what crisis they faced, there was a solution to it.
Yeah. And the
good guys won.
And this idea that things need to be dark and edgy to reflect reality is, to me, that's simply incorrect, because more often than not, stuff does work out. You know, so but I think in the case of this, what you've got is a classic kind of tropey TV episode. You know, you learn about the past, the difficult past of a character. Somebody from their past comes back, and all this kind of stuff happens.
There's a flirt with alcoholism.
Yeah, and there's a mystery element to it as well. You know, so it feels very much like, you know, an outside writer coming into the show and doing an episode of TV in there. But the things that make that not a bad thing for me are the infrastructure of the show, just a great cast and characters and world building. Also, the fact that what this episode does is another example of standalones bringing in elements that are going to be really important So when they get to the point in the story where they are important, you're already familiar with them.
Yeah.
They're not having to just suddenly cram loads of information into a big whiz-bang episode.
No.
Because you already know it, and it's story seeding, I guess. And obviously there's a little bit of meta knowledge going on because we've seen it before, so we could recognise that was being done. But I think even if you don't, you are still seeing the universe of the show being enriched.
Even first time around, I remember this episode. I didn't remember it before we went into it, but as it started playing, I did. And I remember enjoying it for what it was the first time around. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't pick up on.
But you know that obviously in the first episode, the President Santiago was voted in.
Yeah.
And then so we're being reminded of threads and universe consistency. It's not just random stuff.
No.
There's a fabric to it.
And actually, that's one thing to remember is pay attention to the newsreaders and pay attention to what the crowds are talking about and pay attention to the newspapers. And, nothing is there by accident.
Yeah. And just also the fact that they still have media.
Yeah.
And dive bars.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well is there's more references to labour shortages and anti-alien sentiment. So it's
very near future.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at though is the fact that these things keep coming up again and again. Not only show you a consistency of vision of the universe, but a sense that all of this stuff is accumulating and going somewhere.
Yeah, it's a boiling point.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to mention, specifically, I guess, is let me just find my notes. So the president's visiting, and we know that they sound like a pretty liberal president, but that's not a view shared by everyone. So, and that's, I guess, the terrorist attack on this is what it's about. I want to mention the ISN newsreader. This isn't really a spoiler, but she's in pretty much the whole show. Yeah, and it's things like that. The fact that her and there's a male newsreader as well return again and again. That really adds, and they didn't need to do that.
It's just a consistency.
Yeah, it adds to the tapestry of the show as well. So, I mean, I won't go through the sort of the plot by plot.
I don't think you need to in this episode.
No. But what we learn about Garibaldi, though, is that basically he was just like working on on Europa, which was like a real cesspool. And, the family took him in and the dad died because of some stuff that he was embroiled in. He blamed himself and she blamed him as well. And
it's a good exploration of coping mechanisms. Like, he thinks that he's evolved from where he was, but really it's just he hasn't been faced with a particular situation where that's been a pressure. And
also he was the victim of a cover-up, like a smear campaign as well.
100%. But like it, and that's something that he references at the end. It's given him a chance to see, okay, there's still work to do there, personally.
Yeah. Well, they're flawed. They're flawed characters.
Yeah.
And again, when you think of Star Trek, particularly Star Trek The Next Generation, where the characters were pretty much perfect in many ways, that is a big point of difference. It's another example of Jeff Mann having to do stuff he doesn't want to do, and just being in crap positions, like having to collaborate with them and throw the book at Garibaldi even though he knows he's bullshit.
I love that Londo and Jakar both acknowledged that they would absolutely have done this sabotage to Garibaldi if they'd thought of it.
Well, you get the impression with both of them that on a good day they'll do the right thing.
Yeah.
But you just have to get them on a good day.
Yeah. But like
if Londo's just the right level of drunk and wistful,
Yeah.
then he might help you out.
But I kind of love the fact that they're really honest about it. Like, they're like, yeah, this is absolutely something I'd do, but I just hadn't thought of it.
Well, they're both cynics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that they definitely have in common.
And they are very much a product of war.
Yeah.
They know what needs to be done.
They're pragmatists.
To get through. Like, they've been without everything, so they don't blame anyone for trying to get their bit in life. And
I think they're both slightly bemused by having to be politicians as well. Because when you're in war, all of the talk kind of stops.
Yeah.
It's
time for action.
You get some fun stuff with Ivanova, her, you're going to resist, aren't you? And just her...
When request denied. I was like, yes, I love that.
And you get the classic stalling the communications thing as well.
And you can see she's loving it.
Absolutely. I also love futuristic video games in sci-fi shows.
Oh, yeah.
We get the hologram video game here as well. Yeah. I like the fact as well that Londo talks about the goddess of gamblers as well.
Yeah.
But the reason Londo gives for helping him is that I think he sees a bit of Garibaldi in himself and vice versa. And he says that it gives him pleasure to know that things can work out for people like them. That's his...
he talks about being an outsider.
Yes. And he goes to see Jakar as well. And I love all the stuff about... All of the scenes with Jakar they're delicious, And he talks about how he watches me, I watch him. We all watch each other here. It's just kind of a game.
It actually, part of me felt quite safe.
Yeah.
He said that, I know they're all out to get each other, but they also know where each other is all the time.
Keep your enemies close. Jakar offers him a job, which he turns down. There's some quality early to mid-90s collarless shirt action in this episode.
Oh, yes.
As well. I think I owned one of those.
Yeah, I had several of those too.
Yeah.
In Paisley, I believe.
Yeah, I think everyone did. Jeff Mann saves Michael when he gets attacked.
Yeah.
I love the fact that the spaceship is Earth Force One.
Yeah.
It's a nice... that would be the science fiction version of the Harrison Ford movie. I love the fact that Garibaldi's other sort of second-in-command security guy, he turns up loads, he's called Lou, because he's such a Lou. You know what I mean? If this wasn't a sci-fi show, he'd be like a taxi driver or something.
Yeah.
Good, honest Lou. So he goes to Garibaldi, I should say, goes to a seedy bar and falls out of the bar drunk.
Yeah.
This is when we learn about the home guard and all that kind of stuff. I
like the fact it was called Happy Days with the Z.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's as 90s as the collarless shirts.
That's as crazy as it comes.
It is, yeah. This idea of using a standalone to set stuff up so you don't have to force feed it to people at the point where it's going to pay off. Because that's good writing, because the problem is, it's really obvious when somebody writes something into a TV show because they know that this other thing needs to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've already established this, it just feels so much more natural and organic.
Well, it's like, writing where someone says, well, as you know, my uncle that was twice removed on my father's side who killed my mother.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually, if there's lots of coincidence, it's bad writing. I love the fact that when Garibaldi kind of comes to and he's been seen by Franklin, he gets loads of sass from Franklin. He's like, oh, yeah, look at you pisshead. He's kind of like...
Your blood's 100 proof.
Yeah, he's just tutting away about it. And I've got to say, joking aside, Jerry Doyle's got this thing that you can do, that actually plays Garibaldi, that's really impressive, where he generally plays a tough guy, but if you notice, there's a thing he can do with his eyes that gives this real empathy to his character. It gives a kind of it's not that. It's a sort of like softness that he can play. And it's really at odds with because again, as an actor, he was a guy who played a lot of grizzled cab drivers.
Yeah.
Probably knew Luke, but I do think that Jerry Doyle is actually kind of underrated because he is given a lot of the cliche stuff in the show because he's kind of the tough guy. A lot of the I'm coming and hell's coming with me kind of, not on my watch kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think he is capable of actually conveying subtle sensitivity as well.
He's a good actor.
And he's a really, this is going to sound really condescending, but I think he's especially
He's
good.
a special little boy.
No, yeah, he's a little soldier. No, I think he's especially a good TV actor because he's very good at close-up acting.
Yeah,
which is a very just like that. Wow, that terrible impression just gave me COVID. That's like.
That's how powerful I am.
Yes, with the power of your mind. I'm going to wrap things up in a moment, but I do need to do a brief spoiler section.
Okay.
There are a couple of things I want to do. So, but before doing that and saying goodbye to our viewers who are watching Babylon 5 for the first time, any final thoughts, Hannah, before we wrap up?
I think this was a solid standalone, and I would give it a 7 out of 10.
Excellent. I would completely agree with that. Quick reminder that we appreciate feedback. Rewatchprojectpodcast@gmail.com, or leave comments here on the channel. Likes and subscribes appreciated. Check out our friend shows and the other film, TV, music, and general pop culture goodness on this channel. And also, we very much appreciate donations via PayPal if you can afford to do so without causing yourself any financial hardship. What are we talking about next time, Anna?
The next episode is called By Any Means Necessary. The synopsis says, while the station's dock workers stage an illegal strike, Jakar tries to hold a non-religious ceremony, but Londo holds the plant he needs and won't relinquish it. I would say Japery is going to ensue.
Yeah, I like this episode. This is an episode that isn't terribly well regarded. It's another standalone, but I think this is a dark horse, good, really solid standalone episode.
It's directed by Jim Johnston and written by Catherine M. Drennan.
Alrighty. Okay, so if you have not watched Babylon 5 before, then we will say fare thee well.
Fare thee well.
But if you have watched Babylon 5 before, stick around. And we're back. So, yes, the season 1 finale is the assassination of Santiago.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that, obviously they knew it was coming because JMS had essentially written the whole show. But I like the fact that at the very end, Garibaldi says to her, look after him, because she says he likes this place.
Yeah.
And Garibaldi's like, well, look after him because we need all the friends we can get.
Yeah.
And it's when Santiago is assassinated that things really start to go south.
They really go to the shitter.
They do, yes. So I think it's nice that that's signposted and prepared. And also a damning indictment of that woman's security ability. Because she obviously doesn't do a job. So if I was Garibaldi, you see, I'm petty enough to be like, well done, judging me.
Good job, Major.
Yeah.
Give it one of these.
Yeah. No, don't give it COVID. That would be very nice. But okay, that's just for now. We'll be back very soon with the next episode of Babylon 5 By Any Means Necessary. So see you soon. Goodbye.
Take care, everyone.